So you write about lessons learned in leadership, and you bring up some specific incidents I want to ask you about. You talk about meeting some world leaders, and one specific one, quote, "I remember when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. I've been a children's pastor after all." Did you meet Kim Jong-un?
Well, as soon as this was brought to my attention, I certainly made some changes and looked at this passage. And I've met with many, many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. As soon as it was brought to my attention, we went forward and have made some edits. So I'm glad that this book is being released in a couple of days, and that those edits will be in place, and that people will have the updated version.
So you did not meet with Kim Jong-un. That's what you're saying.
I've met with many, many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. I think I've talked extensively in this book about my time serving in Congress, my time as governor, before governor, some of the travels that I've had. I'm not going to talk about my specific meetings with world leaders. I'm just not going to do that. This anecdote shouldn't have been in the book, and as soon as it was brought to my attention, I made sure that that was adjusted. So the book.
That, I can't believe you probably don't know it already, is Kristi Noem, governor of South Dakota, trying to sell her new book, No Going Back. Started out the fact things went awry immediately, and it went awry immediately when she put out in the first excerpt that she killed her dog, Cricket, because the dog was bad. And that story has changed a lot. But then the whole story transitioned to another excerpt where she talks about meeting Kim Jong-un in North Korea and staring him down because she was a children's pastor and she's used to dealing with rascals, whatever you might say. It only took about a half an hour for people to fact check the fact that there's no way on God's green earth she ever met Kim Jong-un. No congressional delegation had when she served. She certainly hasn't as governor of South Dakota. It never happened. But she chose to go in a different direction. She's a book. And again, the book's called No Going Back. And if you've ever worked in Republican politics, you know these people. The golden rules of Republican politics is never apologize and never change the truth, right? So she's decided that really the meeting is a secret. And she says that she's not going to talk about conversations with world leaders. Although the book apparently is rife with other stories of meeting world leaders, but let's not go there. But what I find interesting about this story is that of course was Margaret Brennan, but it didn't just stop at the progressive news organization. She thought she'd be good to go by going on Fox News with Stuart Varney. I mean, he's a good dude, right? See how this went.
He's the only person who will decide. And yes, I do speak to him.
May I ask what he said to you about being vice president?
No, I never tell anybody my personal conversations with
Did the dog story
President
come up
Trump.
In a conversation with Trump?
I talk to President Trump all the time.
About the dog?
About a lot of things. And right now, I tell you what, he is being persecuted in a political witch hunt in this court case. So I'm proud of him about how tough he is and how well he is doing.
Did you bring up the dog?
Yes, enough, Stuart.
Did you
this
bring
interview
up the dog
is ridiculous, what you were doing right now. So you need to stop. It is.
Okay.
It is.
We'll
Let's talk about some real topics that Americans care about.
I'm afraid we're out of time.
Oh, well, of course we are.
We do thank you for being with us.
Right.
I know I pressed hard, but that's what people are talking about to this day.
Yeah.
Governor Noem, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
You bet.
We'll be back in just a moment with the opening.
I don't know. Maybe Fox News has gone woke. That must be it. So, don't worry about it. We all know that Fox News has gone woke. So she's smart. She went to Newsmax. I mean, Newsmax, no way they're going to call her out because it's Newsmax, right? Well, let's see how that went.
To talk about, because the book's called No Going Back, the truth on what's wrong with politics. And I think part of the problem with politics today is that politicians aren't honest with the American people. So if you asked me a month ago, who's at the top of the list to run with Donald Trump, I would have said your name. If you asked me that same question this morning, I don't even think you're on the list.
Really?
So my question
And
for
why
you,
is that?
yes, really, and it's because of things that have come out in this book, like your claims that you met Kim Jong-un. And then over the last week, I've
been to the DMZ. I've been to the area. What I've said
is that... Did you stare down Kim Jong-un? Let me, Governor, one second. I will give you an opportunity to respond. I just want to get this out there. So here's the quote from the book. You say that, I remember when I met North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. Governor, that never happened, did it?
What I have said in the book is that when I became aware of the content, that we had it changed. And that's the way that it is. So I should not have put that anecdote in the book. That I'm not going to
But
talk
an
about my
anecdote
meetings.
indicates that it happens,
I'm
right?
not going to talk about my conversations with world leaders. I've been involved in policy for 30 years. For 30 years, I've been traveling the world, talking to world leaders, and that is a conversation that I'm not going to have in this book. So I've answered that in interviews already. I've been very forthright, and I think that a typical politician wouldn't be that honest. As soon as it became to my attention, I asked for the content to be changed, and it has been.
Governor, I'm not asking you about the details of this alleged meeting. I'm asking if the meeting actually happened. I don't think it did, and I think if it did, you'd be able to confirm for me that yes, it did, and here's when it happened. It happened, say, at such and such a date or a month, or you don't have to be specific.
I'm not going to talk about my conversations
You're going to
with world
continue
leaders.
to have to answer this question then.
I don't think
She got her ass kicked on Newsmax. Okay? I mean, obviously the reasoning is it might hurt their dream of getting Donald Trump reelected, but nonetheless, she was for sure thought she'd go on there and could tell lies and they would cover her ass. They almost did. Another guy on Newsmax tried to say it was her liberal plant editor that did it to her, and she wasn't having that because it's just even more of a lie than even she could handle. But here's what struck me. They aren't doing the same thing to people who lie about our election results or what actually happened on January 6th. I mean, think about that. They beat her the hell. News organizations across the political spectrum are beating the hell out of Kristi Noem because she shot a dog and lied openly about meeting a foreign dictator. But when the same people who lied about January 6th go on TV, including Donald Trump and others, they're not treated the same way. Those lies have become accepted. So it seemed like the perfect time to talk about the media once again and the threat to our democracy from the perspective of what our media is doing and what they're failing to do. So I got the perfect guest, a longtime journalist and media critic on the show. So let's get on with it. I am Fred Wellman, host of On Democracy with FP Wellman. You're right here on the Midas Touch Network and elsewhere. Let's get on with the show. Oh, man. Welcome. As I mentioned previously, I am Fred Wellman, the host of On Democracy, the FP Wellman. You're in the right place right here on the Midas Touch Network. You know, I am so excited for this week's show. After watching those Kristi Noem debacles unfold, you know, and by the way, if you're her media director, it's going to be okay. There's safe places for you. Call me. And if not, I mean, because I don't know how our media director is surviving right now, but I don't give up hope for them. I couldn't get over how different she was being treated compared to the likes of Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, and frankly, even Donald Trump by the media. I mean, what has happened to the media that the danger to our democracy is less important than the life of a puppy or lying about meeting Kim Jong-un? So I'm thrilled to have somebody who can talk about that, writes about it, lived it for most of his adult life, and that is Mark Jacob. Welcome to the show. He's a former Metro editor at the Chicago Tribune, co-author of 8 books on history, author of the weekly Stop the Presses newsletter at stopthepresses.news, which examines how right-wing extremism is exploiting the weaknesses in American journalism. Mark, I've been wanting to get you on the show for a while. Welcome to On Democracy.
Thanks for asking me.
So, Kristi Noem, I mean, what a train wreck, right? I mean, as a PR guy in my other life, and you as a journalist, I've never seen more of a debacle as far as crisis management and lying. But the thing is, aside from all of that, you know, I was really struck by how she's universally being held to account by the media across the political spectrum, while Republicans who openly support the overthrow of our government are invited on without blinking an eye, right? So, what does that say to you as an observer of all this?
I think it says that they could throw her to the wolves and just go on about their business, you know. And the fact of it is, if Donald Trump had said those things or written those things, they would be defending it right now.
Right.
I mean, you know, he already bragged about how he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, and it's become more and more obvious that that's probably right. I mean, you know, all this stuff coming out in court about Stormy Daniels, you know, hey, you look like my daughter, that kind of stuff, you know, which would normally offend people, doesn't offend him anymore. So I think that there's a different standard of behavior. In fact, there's no standard for Trump. Whatever he does is fine. They don't care. Yeah. But Kristi Noem, I think that you know, if you're going to brag about shooting a dog in the head, I think that maybe there's just that little sliver of decency still there.
I mean, everybody loves dogs. I mean, that was what I found the funniest is people like Laura Loomer and, you know, the guys on Stephen Bannon's show were even saying, oh, man, you know, we're dog people, brother. You know, and I just think it's strange. I mean, now, of course, we know Cora Lewandowski's in her world. Corey is a veteran of the Trump world. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he's orchestrating a lot of this foolishness. But it does strike me as so strange how hard even, the Newsmax guys are holding her account and others. But you said something key. I mean, as we went to the show today, for those who know, we record on Wednesday, somebody posted a meme where Trump reposted a meme showing his professor from Penn saying that he was the smartest student he ever had, when the actual quote was the professor said he was the dumbest student he ever had. I mean, literally completely different. And you're right. I mean, how is he so immune, do you think, after watching him all these years?
Well, unfortunately, and you also look at this stuff. The Stormy Daniels thing is a good example because he, Franklin Graham, was all over Bill Clinton back in the Lewinsky thing, and he demanded his resignation because he said, if you lie to your wife, you'll lie to the American people. But yet you have Trump, who's like always lied to his wife. I mean, lied to all three of his wives. And Franklin Graham, when the Stormy Daniels thing came out in 2018, Franklin Graham said, well, I think, this is nobody's business. This Stormy Daniels stuff is nobody's business. So the hypocrisy is just so rampant on the right wing right now that it just doesn't matter. And they, it just really, Trump gets a complete lifelong pass to do whatever he wants, and they don't mind. And frankly, the sad thing about it is, I think that Trump's appeal to white people to make it seem as if they own the country and all the brown people are renting it is, I think that's really worked for him. And I think it's for that reason, it makes people in a very psychological, emotional way, it makes people feel good about themselves. This is really my country, I'm in control of the culture and it will never change, that kind of attitude. Trump plays into that, and therefore they just give him a pass on everything. It's kind of sad because it's really they've switched off the part of their brain that actually makes critical decisions.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things that struck me is at the trial, it opened with David Pecker talking about how they really just created fake stories. The Ted Cruz father being associated with Lee Harvey. But what struck me in turning to our journalism topic is, for me, how it finally showed not on a camera, unfortunately, but it did show under oath how the fake news propaganda system feeds into the mainstream media. I mean, I Googled it myself, where that story about Ted Cruz fed its way into the New York Times, but they framed it as Donald Trump accuses Ted Cruz's father of being, what I'm saying? And so it struck me, right? I mean, that system, right?
Yeah, but Fred, the thing is that, and I went back and researched this, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Politico, they all reported it straight. Their headline said, Donald Trump says that Ted Cruz's father was associated with the Kennedy assassination. They didn't say, they knew by that time, they knew he was a liar. They knew he lied about everything, and they knew this was an outrageous, ridiculous statement. Yet they reported it straight as if it might be, real. And even in the New York Times story, which was written by Maggie Haberman, who's come under a lot of criticism, it was the 7th paragraph before she had the denial from the Cruz people. The 7th paragraph, I counted. Jesus. I mean, what kind of journalism is that? And so there's a reason why the right wing thinks it can feed stuff, can feed complete BS into the system, because it can,
because it works.
Yes, right, it works, and that's just the mainstream media just buying it, just deciding, we're just stenographers. You say it, we'll put it up there. Who knows what's true? And Fred, as somebody who was in the journalism business for like 4 decades, I know that that's not what journalism is supposed to be. And that's not the value added of journalism. I mean, anybody, do journalists just want to put up a message board and let anyone put on it what they want? That's not journalism. Journalism is value added, where you understand the context, you understand the past, you understand what this person's done before. You can check it out. You can look at records. You can look at statistics. You can consult experts. Yep. That's the value added of journalism. It's not, well, they said it, we're just going to put it up there and who knows what's true. That's irresponsible, and it's killing us now. It is threatening our democracy right now, is this laziness by the news media.
Yeah, and what bothers me a lot too is the way they do counter it often is saying, like a headline will be, Ted Cruz denies Trump accusation, right? It's not like Trump is completely full of shit. It should say no evidence whatsoever of accusation, but no, it's always how the other side reacts to these lies as opposed to debunking the lie itself.
Well, I think they think that's the fairness. It's
Yeah.
leading with the denial.
Right.
But they could also, another thing is you can also ignore complete crap that somebody
Right.
says that is not true. It is possible for the media to ignore that and just and go out and actually instead go out and interview somebody about their prescription drug costs and what it means to them to have a cap on insulin prices.
Right.
I mean, there are plenty of real issues out there that don't have anything to do with some bogus accusation and a faked photo. I mean, they faked the photo.
Yeah.
That Ted Cruz's dad was conspiring with Lee Harvey Oswald.
I mean, the National Enquirer, and for me, it shocks me to this day because now they've figured it out. Bannon has figured this out. Christopher Rufo has figured it out, and they're able to inject extreme lies, extreme myths, or fudging facts, like Rufo's attack on the transgender community, which has been very effective. That has bled into mainstream media. I had an advocate on here a couple of weeks ago who talks about, actually, I had the father of a transgender child who was a local rabbi here in St. Louis, and he was despondent because the effectiveness of that technique, where it goes from lie and myth into mainstream media, into mainstream thought, means that more and more polls are, and amongst people who look like us or share our political views, are actually going against the transgender community. And it's an abomination the way they're highlighting and I guess pushing what are extreme lies and myths and scaring people, and it has real world effects.
Right. Well, it's the right wing is super good at this, and they know how to like spin gold out of straw.
Yeah.
Because what they do is, Chris Rufo or somebody else will come up with some completely
crazy shit,
not true, but we'll get it into Fox News and Newsmax and all those propaganda services they'll spin it out, and then suddenly it's because so many people are saying it or thinking it, it's become legitimized. And then the New York Times grabs it, and that's there, and they feel like they've got to report that because that's the other side.
Right.
And so what I call performative objectivity by the New York Times does it. And you got this in the most recent interview with Joe Kahn, the executive editor, which I've been ranting about because it's so outrageous because and in that interview, actually it was framed terribly by Ben Smith of the Semaphore, where he said, well, Joe, what do you think about the idea that you ought to be campaigning for Joe Biden, and nobody's asking for that.
No.
Nobody's asking for the New York Times to campaign for Joe Biden. At least I'm not. I'm asking them to get serious about the threat against our democracy by right-wing fascists. They're fascists. And I'm not, that's not like some sort of loose insult. That's what they are.
Yep.
That's what they talk like fascists. They act like fascists. They tried to nullify an election 4 years ago.
Yep.
So it's not like, it's not like I'm making this up. That's what's going on. Yet the New York Times has decided that they're not going to, they decided that democracy is not the number one issue. When in that interview, Joe Kahn says, well, democracy is not really the number one issue. The number one issue is immigration and then the economy. Well, number one, if you do actually look at the polls, and you don't need to look at the polls if you're in the New York Times, you need to actually make decisions based on reality.
Right.
But if you do look at the polls, even that shows that immigration is not the number one topic.
No.
So but Joe Kahn has decided that, well, we just got to look at the polls and let the polls tell us. The polls tell us, Fred, the polls tell us that the economy is bad when it's good.
Right.
The polls tell us that crime is up when it's down.
Yep.
And so all the polls seem to measure is the ability of propagandists to flood lies into the system.
Right.
And then you get the New York Times legitimizing those lies by citing the polls.
Right.
And just to go back to what I was saying a minute ago, it's the job of the New York Times to use, which is, has very smart people and a lot of them to doing their journalism. It's the job of the New York Times to send reporters out to figure out what's important, to figure out what the facts are, and then to make its priorities based on that.
Right.
And if you looked at the situation in this country right now, and you do not think that the preservation of democracy, the threat against democracy, is the number one topic, the number one issue facing this country, then you're fooling yourselves. And yet Joe Kahn said in that interview that it wasn't.
Right.
That he said, well, that's not, he was noted the polls. It's like,
right.
It's outrageous.
To me, they've abrogated their duty. right? I mean, in the end, you're supposed to shape good news shapes opinions and encounters the opinions, right? What they're doing is now they're just an echo chamber. They've admitted it in that interview. They're basically echoing the things that Fox News is saying because, well, immigration is bad. But look, I was a public affairs officer in Iraq. And one of the, they had, oh gosh, his name escapes me, two-time Pulitzer Award winner, a Pulitzer Prize winner, as their John Fisher Burns. There you go. John Fisher Burns was the chief in Baghdad. And when John called me, at 10 o'clock at night, my blood ran cold, because it meant John had found something fishy in one of our reports or heard a story about the Iraqi I was in charge of training the Iraqi security forces as the spokesman. And he found things. And you know what he did? He dug up truth. And if he got me, and I had a great boss, Petraeus, who said, look, if a story is accurate, and it makes us look bad, that's not negative. That's just the way it is. And that's what the New York, and I always use the New York Times as the example, how often they did what I would call a negative story about my organization, but it was right? If I remember one time the outgoing Minister of Defense took his $2 million limousines with him when he went back to, I think he lived way out west, and they're like, yeah, is that true? Did he get away? They're like, yep. Yeah, I mean, what do you want me to say? Yep, that happened. Like, what are you gonna do about it? Nothing. We're not gonna let it happen again. That's for damn sure. It is what it is. But now they're literally chasing public opinion and reinforcing public opinion. Joe Biden's old. Great. Here's 5 stories about Joe Biden being old. It is beyond me that they've completely lost the bubble on what a leading news organization is, a news shaper and not a news chaser. And that is shocking to me when I hear it.
Well, and 2 months ago, or about 2 months ago, A.G. Sulzberger, the publisher of the New York Times, gave a big speech at the Reuters Institute in London, or in Oxford, I think it was. And this is like this big, all about why the New York Times is independent and why it's not, it's going to resist pressures from the left and the right, and it's going to go about that. And I thought it was just really grandstanding and half truths as far as is what the real issues are. But one thing he said in that just blew me away. He said, we don't care about being on the right side of history. He said all this stuff about being on the right side of history, that just, that's not our business. We're just supposed to call the shots as we see them today. And that's just not what we're about. And think about that, Fred. I mean, you're a newspaper reporting on a nation in one of the biggest political crises in its history. I mean, a legitimate threat to the future of democracy in this country. And you don't want to be on the right side of history? You don't think that's part of your brief, part of what you're supposed to be doing? And it makes it, that's why, Fred, that's why the New York Times is treating this whole assault by Trump on everything that we should hold dear about our society and a free society and freedom, is because New York Times is trivializing it.
Right.
In February, during the Trump business fraud trial, they actually ran a page 1 story about how the Trump family was their fashions as they walked into court, and it is on page 1. Jeez. I mean, they've decided it's just some sort of amusing thing that's going on, and isn't this hilarious, or isn't this interesting? Or, I mean, can you imagine there's a full-fledged assault on the future of freedom in your country, and you're turning it into a feature story?
Yeah.
I mean, it just blows my mind. It really does.
It does. I think this is a great place to take a brief break. We're going to go back to this topic in just a second. We've got a great sponsor. Our friends at Rome this week are our sponsor show, so we'll be right back. If you're like me, you understand the pain of finding out what to wear each day. I mean, most clothes I have are uncomfortable, never actually the size I really am, and not to mention how much time is wasted trying to find a good outfit. And when you do have a good fit, you can only wear it for a few hours. We have to change for an important meeting or dinner, find a new outfit. Now, everyone wants to dress well at all times because, simply put, it's a confidence booster, even for men like me. Men's closets were due for a radical overhaul and reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man, and here's why. Rhone helps you get ready for any occasion with the commuter collection, which offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, quarter zips, and polos. You've never have to worry about what to wear when you have the Rhone commuter collection. With Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can Just ditch it all in the dry cleaner, or ditch the dry cleaner completely, put it all in your own washing machine yourself. You know, I'm obsessed with the Rowan commuter collection. We're on the move a lot, whether it's I'm catching a flight or I'm going to a meeting or whatever. The Rowan commuter collection has never let me down so far. The commuter collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to head to rowan.com/Fred, use promo code Fred to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to RHONE.com/Fred and use code Fred. It's time for you to find your corner office of comfort. Check out our sponsor, Rowan. I hope you'll buy some outfits today. And we're back. So on that note, pulling the thread more, you did a great piece the other day about how journalists have become readily accepting of being lied to, you know, and you kind of went, you had 5 reasons, if I remember, and how they make it. It was a great piece. I love to highlight it for our viewers. It's like, because a lot of us are shocked. I mean, they're sitting there knowing it's a lie and yet accepting of it. And then the excuses they come up with are shocking to me. I mean, what were some of the things you saw?
Well, one thing is that there's this great cynicism among political reporters in this country.
Yes.
And it's one thing to know that, you know, you're going to be spun in a certain way. But to fully accept that you're going to be lied to and that you're just going to report the lies. You know, one thing about it is an example I gave was an article in, I think it was a Washington Post article, and the Trump spokesman says, well, you know, Donald Trump has always stood for law and order and preserving our Constitution. And they just ran that quote. And they didn't say, despite the fact that, Trump is accused of 88 felonies, and he posted on Truth Social that we should terminate, the termination of the Constitution would be a good idea. Yeah. Termination being his word. Yeah. And, you know, so it's not like there's some rule in journalism that whatever some lying politician says to you, you've got to instantly put in the newspaper. There's no law that says that, but many of them act like it is. Yeah. That to me is stunning. And it's the cynicism is what bothers me. Yeah. And one of the mottos that I've come up with in this age is that fact checking is not enough. We have to be fact crusading. You know, that because the whole system of fact checking that came up in the last decade, you know, Trump, it didn't stop Trump. It didn't even slow him down. No. And they did so much fact checking. Well, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Fact checking is part of what journalists should do, but you know, they should. But so much of the fact checking is after the fact. It is 2 days later, we're going to do a big article about how Trump, you know, lied that he was talking to union workers in auto plants in Michigan, which was a 100% Trump lie. Yep. You know, he spoke at a non-union plant, even though, you know, he lied to the press and they said it because that's what they do. Yep. And so you say that 2 days later, Trump won with his lie, you know, and you say that, and what the news organizations don't do that they should do is they should have video at the ready. And some of them have started to do it, you know, so they know what they're going to lie about because they lie all the time about the same things. Yep. They should have the video ready to where they can just pull it up and say, well, no, you said this 3 weeks ago. Or what they should do is not do any live interviews with known liars. Number one, you don't really even have to platform liars. I mean, for example, New York Times has run op-eds by Kellyanne Conway. I mean, that's pretty much like saying, well, audience, we're going to let liars lie to you. So, you know, that's part of, it's okay to lie. We're going to let them do it. We're going to help them do it. Right. You know, and so there is this platforming of liars. You know, so a lot of people like Kellyanne Conway, they didn't have to run that op-ed. Right. But I understand that when you're talking to a presidential candidate, you may have to have them on. You're talking to the House Speaker, you do have to have them on. But you don't have to have them on live. You can do an interview with them, and then the first lie that happens, you stop, you clarify for your audience what the lie was, then you resume the interview, tape it, and fact check it. Yep. And also, what doesn't happen nearly enough is confronting the liar in real time. You know, that's what I mean by fact crusading instead of fact checking, because fact crusading means The news media should be so offended that this person wants to lie to their audience that they're going to publicly punish them for it by embarrassing them right in real time. They're going to say, no, that's not the case. No, why won't you answer that question? No, I've asked you this question 4 times and you still haven't answered it. Are you really not going to answer this very basic question?
Yep.
They need to get aggressive with them.
Yep.
And if they don't want to be on the show anymore, okay, don't be on the show anymore. This idea that part of what's killing political journalism in this country is access, the desperation to get access.
Yes.
And I think it's a myth. I don't think the news organizations need to do that for ratings or anything. I think that they could find plenty of people who would actually tell them the truth.
Yep.
Or they could do more in-depth stuff. They don't need to bring on the same old, Lindsey Graham types to just lie to them all the time.
And those guys need them more, Mark. I mean, I did this for a living as a PR guy. Lindsey Graham needs that media hit more than they need him on. I think that's the part. There was this weird flip, especially in the political media, where they don't realize access to them is the golden jewel of the political side, right? I mean, it's if you remember that scandal but the story came out about Nancy Mace, where she literally instructed her staff to get her, was it some ridiculous 30 hits a week in the media? They understand that they need these media to include places like CNN, even MSNBC, because that's a new audience for them to want to get money from her. Hey, look, I'm not going to lie. I had a political campaign, and I'm going to say the numbers, but every MSNBC hit my candidate got was a boatload of money into our accounts. I'm not going to lie to you, because people see them and they donate to them. But it's weird. I mean, when did that switch where they decided that they need these liars more than the liars need them?
Yeah, that's been the big mistake.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the liars can lie all they want on Newsmax, but if they get to lie on NBC, that's a giant win for them because it legitimizes their lie. It makes them more important.
Right.
So I don't know when that switch happened, but it's a terrible thing. A real bad example of that was, the first Kristen Welker's first show, it was Meet the Press, I believe.
Yep.
And so she has Trump on, and it's a disaster. He lies. The thing about it, Fred, is liars can lie faster than you can correct them. And also, at least Stefanik, one of the best liars, most talented liars, she lies 3 times in the same sentence. Yep. So how are you going to correct her? And the example that I wrote about with the Kristen Welker thing was that what she said is, that she's talking to Trump, and Trump is given the whole post-birth abortion lie, which, by the way, in a functioning democracy, if somebody was to lie that outrageously over and over again, and they would be completely delegitimized. Right. And the fact that people can say such a ridiculous, outrageous lie, post-birth abortion would be murder and you would be arrested for it. It doesn't happen. It's a complete made-up thing that they keep on saying. And on that debut show for Kristen Welker, she said, Trump says post-birth abortion, she corrects him. Trump says post-birth abortion, she corrects him. He says it again and again, and she doesn't correct him. I guess she felt like, well, I corrected him enough. But to me, what that really means is that Trump won the whole exchange, by 4-2. Yeah. He's on the scoreboard right there. 4 lies, 2 corrections. Yeah. Trump won.
And then he gets the clip. That's the other thing they all forget. They seem to forget you can clip these things any way you want to. Hell, we do it, right? you know, but it does go back to Bannon saying, flood the zone with bullshit. And they've become very effective flooding the zone with bullshit. And modern journalists are completely unprepared for it, it feels like. Especially political journalists. I would say political journalists.
The thing that's most disappointing to me in this whole era, the Trump era, and you got to call it the Trump era, even though it's horrendous that you have such a thing, is just how unprepared the news media were, especially the Washington kind of insular beltway types. And they had it good, they could pal around with Republicans and Democrats, and they could go to the same cocktail parties, and they could play them as equals. I mean, I was part of this whole thing when I used to edit stories out of Washington for the Chicago Tribune. I was Nation World editor. And I would count the number of quotes we had from Republicans and Democrats. I would make sure they were about equal. And and at the time, I felt like that was my version of fairness. And looking back on it, I'm ashamed of that because fairness is not fairness to the Republicans and Democrats. It's fairness to your audience. It's fairness to the public.
Right.
And instead of like only publishing the quotes that had some validity or had some facts or were not, lies, I just counted the number of Republicans and Democrats and just decided, it's about equal. That's fine. Hit print and put it in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And so that kind of system was so prevalent in Washington that it was, and this whole kind of thing where we're all in the same game together. That's why the correspondence dinner drives me nuts, because it's politicians and journalists yucking it up, palling around, drinking together, and acting like they're all part of the same club. Well, if they're all part of the same club, it's a bad club, because journalists should be adversaries. And they should be advocates for the facts. They should not be palling around with the politicians. They should be fact checking them. They should be looking into their backgrounds. They should be doing their jobs, and not and this whole cushy Washington Beltway thing, I think, made the news media totally unprepared for a systematic liar and dirty trickster like Donald Trump. Yeah. And the other thing, so I'm very disappointed with the news media about that. The other thing that even I couldn't have quite predicted, that's incredibly, deeply disappointing, is how the rest of the Republican Party just folded like a tent. Yeah. I mean, in a way that I mean, just the cowardice on display there is, and anti-American impulses by these people is so, I mean, they're betraying their country, Fred. Yeah. They're betraying their country for their own personal ambitions. You think Elise Stefanik doesn't know what's going on? Oh, that she doesn't know.
She's a smart woman.
She knows exactly what she's doing.
Exactly. So is Tim Scott. And it goes to that normalization of these guys. And you talk about Kellyanne Conway. I mean, she and David Plouffe just announced they're going to do a podcast together. So so Obama's former campaign manager and senior president advisor is going to partner with Kellyanne Conway, the alternative facts, bare feet on the couches in the Oval Office lady, is going to be doing a podcast together with an Obama guy. But don't worry, it's going to be about, political tactics and stuff. It's just an abomination. I mean, she's a serial liar, unaware of the truth. And that's that. I remember you were lamenting this normalization of madness is what it is, isn't it?
Well, that's what it is. I mean, it's not, he's going to say his thing, she's going to say hers, it's okay. No, when you pair up with people like that, you are normalizing them. You're acting like that's a normal thing. Kellyanne Conway made up a terrorist attack that didn't even happen.
Right.
The famous Bowling Green massacre.
Yep.
She said in early March that COVID was contained.
Yep.
She violated the Hatch Act dozens of times, if not hundreds of times. Yep. She's a bad actor. She's an anti-American dirty trickster.
Yep.
It's just, I don't understand why someone like Plouffe would do that.
Yeah.
Is it for money? Is it for, I just don't get it. It's Fred, the kind of people I want to see in public life and in journalism right now are the kind of people that are going to be in big trouble if Trump establishes a dictatorship.
Yeah.
I do not want to listen to people who are going to be just okay if Trump establishes a dictatorship. Yep. I want people who Trump sees as his enemies.
Right.
Those are the good journalists.
Because they're telling the truth. That's all it takes. It's just to tell the truth. You don't actually have to attack them. It's
right.
Yeah. Yeah, and to that last thing I want to talk about a little bit too is you talked about, you wrote a great piece this here today in the Courier, as a matter of fact, about how basically his headline, the less Trump supporters know about him, the better they like him. And it kind of examined how ill-informed his supporters are, how they aren't hearing a lot of the bad stuff. They aren't, the trial's not being reported on. So it kind of goes, the last piece of this conversation, I think, with journalism is there's the part that they're not, they're giving them both sides, but then there's the part they're just leaving shit out. And I have a personal example of this. I'll be very honest with you. I was a senior advisor to Marcus Flowers in Georgia during the campaign down there with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And we got tipped off, I won't say by who, but it was someone local, said, hey, Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend she's having an affair with is Brian Glenn from Right Side Broadcasting. He was the guy she's always with. We didn't know that, but once we started asking around, it was confirmed. Well, there happened to be a reporter who had heard the same thing from The Guardian, of all places, was in district for like 3 weeks. He heard it from a waitress. Okay. He literally got tipped flipped off by a waitress at a restaurant. Yeah, she's like, oh, have you seen Marjorie? Oh yeah, she's over with that Brian Glenn. That's her boy. You know, she was still married. Brian Glenn was very married. The Guardian investigated. They put a follower on her, caught her picking him up at the airport in her campaign vehicle, taking him up to her house. Okay, he was there the night she got doxxed. Okay, or swatted. She got swatted. He filmed it because he was at her house. Okay, that's a coincidence. All these things. So she's having an affair during the campaign, using her campaign funds to do it. It's confirmed. They go to his house in Texas to confront him with his wife. He confirms it essentially. But you know what? Not one single political reporter in Georgia would run the story. Not one. They thought it was beneath them. It's sordid, Fred. I'm like, are you effing kidding me? She's using campaign funds to carry on an affair. She reported, they carried her being swatted, but didn't mention the fact that her boyfriend was there and her husband wasn't. You know what I'm saying? And it was this arrogance that they were above it to tell such a sordid tale. Voters need to know these things. When a woman is posting pictures of herself reading her Bible in front of her crosses on the wall, yet is carrying on an open affair misusing campaign funds. But that was beneath. And this was so when you say it's infected Washington, I'm going to tell you it's also infected Atlanta. It's infected, capitals across the country where political reporters seem to feel that they are smarter than the people they're supposed to be informing.
Right. Well, there is that. Another thing is that a lot of mainstream media has become irrelevant to these right wing, the MAGA types. They have. It's really been a brilliant disinformation operation. I mean, to me, the 2-word summary for the last quarter century is propaganda works.
Yeah.
And it does. And so Fox News keep on telling people things. And finally, the thing that Fox News did that I found really remarkable, is that they reported a lot on the other media, like, oh, look at this horrible thing MSNBC is doing. Look at this horrible thing that the mainstream media. So it wasn't just that they wanted to get their viewers to trust them. They wanted to get their viewers to trust no one else. And therefore they could get their viewers in this, in this bubble to where they didn't believe anything else. And then that's when Fox News could not tell them things. Right. After that Trump's social media post where he called for termination of the Constitution, Fox News mentioned that for about 1 minute in the 2 days after that. Yeah. They are really good at hiding the news from their viewers, and people need to look at that whole Dominion voting systems lawsuit. And the thing about that is that was Fox News willingly paying $750 million because they were caught red-handed on purpose lying to their viewers about the most important thing that was going on right then, which was the questions about the legitimacy of the 2020 election. They were caught red-handed on purpose. And what they did is the problem was that they had a few people at Fox who were actually going by facts, and they declared Arizona in Biden's camp, which was true. And then they got all this blowback, and they were had all these emails and texts saying, well, maybe we should withdraw that. Maybe we should, this and that. And they actually got rid of the guy who correctly for Fox News said that Arizona went to Biden. And they started getting all this blowback. And as the documents that were released in that lawsuit showed, and then they made a systematic decision to hide the facts and to spread the lies to their viewers. Yeah. I mean, that's what they did. Yeah. But people believe them because that's what they watch, and they don't watch anything else. And the rest, that mainstream media, that's the liberal New York Times and all that. Yep. New York Times is not liberal. I mean, it's not acting liberal right now. It just isn't. And so they're keeping people in a bubble. And the thing that in that piece for Courier, for the Stop the Presses newsletter, I made it clear that these people want to be lied to. I mean, they've made a decision to be lied to. They like some of the message of Trump. They don't like the fact that he's cheating on his wife with a porn star, or bragging about grabbing the private parts of women, or that he stole nuclear secrets. If they even know that, they don't like it, but they're able to shut it out. They're able to, to block that off and to like the rest of it. To like him insulting this person or that person. but they are willingly ignorant. There's this kind of intentional ignorance that's going on. And you get this stuff like, a real good example that was in that piece was this police union in Michigan has endorsed Trump. And they asked the guy, one of the newspapers asked the guy, the president of the union, says, well, wait a second, do you realize that the mob incited by Trump was beating up cops at the Capitol? What do you think about that? What do you think about the fact that Trump wants to pardon all the people who were beating the heck out of cops at the Capitol? And the president of the union, the police union, says, well, Trump talks in wide swaths. So in other words, well, he probably doesn't mean what he's saying. He's just like, it's just one of those things he's saying. And so I suggested that the correct Republican bumper sticker for this year would be, don't believe anything that Trump says, but trust him anyway. Because that's the message they're doing, is don't take him seriously when he talks about, sending federal troops into American cities, or using the Justice Department to round up his enemies, or closing down MSNBC. Don't believe him on any of that, but trust him enough to be president. That's what they're saying.
Wow, what a scary time. And again, the media is frustrating for all of us, because it just seems like the people who should be really chronicling this and examining it aren't interested in doing that much. So, well, Mark, this has been a great conversation. I could talk to you all day, which we'll have to again. I really appreciate your time. Keep what you're doing. I love the newsletter. I always ask the last thing so people know where to find you. Where can our viewers and listeners find you? Because your newsletter is terrific, by the way.
Yeah, well, I'm on Twitter. It's MarkJacob16, and I'm on Threads, Mark Jacob News, and the Stop the Presses newsletter is at stopthepresses.news.
Terrific. Well,
it's free to subscribe.
I love free. Well, I really appreciate you, Anthony, and keep up the fight. And thanks for joining us here on the Midas Touch Network.
Well, thanks for asking me.
Yeah, we'll see you soon. Oh, wow. I honestly, I could just keep talking to Mark. There's just so many angles. I do recommend you follow his newsletter and all. There's just so many angles to this, and it's important we keep track of it. It's important you guys stay informed. We find out what's going on in the world. But you can see the challenge we've got. The Republicans have decided the truth doesn't matter. The Republicans decide that authoritarianism is what they want. I've been doing a couple of things, and I want to highlight these before I let you go. Two things we've been doing that I really love lately is I've been doing the In the Hot Seat interviews. If you haven't seen these yet, we've got about 12 online on Midas Touch Network. It's exclusive on the Midas Touch Network. It's called In the Hot Seat with FP Wellman. You can just go on YouTube and search it out, where we're talking to Democratic candidates and nominees across the country running for Congress, Senate, governor, and they're fantastic. And it's great when you talk to famous people like Colin Allred or Andy Kim in New Jersey, but I'm really enjoying talking to people like Callie Barr up in Michigan, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and Caroline Gleick, who just got the Democratic nomination for Utah Senate. I really recommend you check this out. I'm thrilled, and my best part is that you wonderful Midas Mighty viewers and listeners always give these guys a boost. Every single one of these campaigns reaches out to me after we interview them, and it gets posted saying that you guys came through for them with donations and support. Follow them on social media, and I just really, but that's really important, and I'm just thrilled you guys are a part of it and you're acting on those things. The second thing you may have heard me talk about before, and I highlighted on the other day on social media, is the Forgotten Democrats. Now, Forgotten Democrats is a unique little organization that I'm proud to be the national chairman for. We're in our first cycle. We're getting up and running, but the model is very simple. It's been used in Ohio. It's been used in Missouri and Tennessee, called Blue Ohio and Blue Missouri. The idea is called a bathtub funding model, and because of a special FEC earmark that we've got, your funds go into a pot. Your donations go into a pot. And then as we get close to the election, we'll look at all the candidates that are out there, the nominees, Democratic nominees, and see who's got the least money first. And those are the least money, based on the funds we have available in our pot, will get a disbursement from you to that candidate who needs the money the most. We have found in research here at Washington University in St. Louis that the average congressional campaign takes about $200,000 to be an effective campaign. Shockingly, 126 races last cycle for Congress, the House of Representatives, Democrats never raised $200,000 for the entire cycle. 126 Republicans ran essentially unopposed. Another 21 did run unopposed. We're hoping to turn that tide. It's been very effective in Ohio. It's been very effective in Missouri. We have more candidates running for State House in Missouri than in recent memory. So having said that, I would love you to check out ForgottenDems.org, ForgottenDemocrats.org. We'll put that up on the screen. I just love doing it. We're getting up and running. We've got a town hall coming out June 21st. You can also get on our email list. If nothing else, you just text Fred to 33777. So Those are the things I'm trying to do on the national level in addition to volunteering. And that's the last note. If all the things you just heard frustrate you, if all the things you just listened to make you despondent and you worry about the future of our country, it starts with you. It starts at home. Here in St. Louis, where I live, this last cycle for school board race, a lot of the Moms for Liberty and the far-right extremists and chaos agents ran for office. One of our local hard-right MAGA radio show hosts actually endorsed 13 candidates for local school boards across the metro region, and he was 0 for 13. Because people like you who live in those places stepped up, volunteered, ran for office, called for them, knocked on doors for them, stood on the side of the road waving their freaking signs. That's what you do. So at the last thing I say, if you don't even have money, you don't want to sign up for a monthly donation or even donation at all, that's okay. Call your local candidate for whatever office, from Senate to local city council, and find out what they need, because I guarantee you, they need you. They need you. And democracy starts at home. So I always urge you, if you want to find a place in all this, I get messages almost every day. Somebody, what can I do? I always tell them, look, it doesn't take money. I tell candidates this: grab some signs, grab a group of your friends with signs for your favorite candidate, and stand on the side of the intersection, the busiest road in town during rush hour, and yell and wave and get people to honk for your candidate. It's that simple. I know it sounds stupid, but that stuff works. You are our democracy, and without you, there is none. So my last urgent call to you as we shine off this wonderful show with great conversation with a great guest, and we go into another incredible week of craziness in this country. You are the difference in our democracy. It takes you to pick up the phone and have the courage to say, how can I help? That's where the fight starts. It's not tweets. It's not a Facebook post. That's a part of it. But really, when you step up physically and help someone run for office or help a campaign you care about, we just got 380,000 signatures on petitions to get reproductive rights on the ballot in November here in Missouri. They needed 170,000. Now, this is what's really interesting. The campaign that ran that, the organization that set it up and ran the petition effort to get these signatures, the necessary signatures, and there's some nuances to it, but I won't go into that. But bottom line is they need 170,000 signatures. They estimated that less than 10% or so of the signatures they would get would come from volunteer canvassers. They actually raised money, they hired professionals, or they hired people hourly wages to go out and be paid to canvass. As it turns out, almost 130,000 of the signatures came from volunteer canvassers. Literally, they almost got the number they needed, and it could have gotten more in 3 months, purely from people who said, how can I help? Got training on how to do petitioning, and went out to their local communities, stood in front of the library, stood in front of Busch Stadium on opening day of the baseball season, and signed people up to get reproductive rights on the Constitution on the ballot. Okay? Volunteers. That's what does it. So I leave you with that thought. If you're frustrated by the direction of your government, step out your front door and get in the fight. And with that, thank you for being part of this wonderful community. I hope you'll find us on Substack, fpwellman.substack.com. We will see you next week. Catch the latest in the hot seats. I think there's 2 in the can right now with some wonderful candidates. They'll be on Midas Touch this week. And I will see you next week right here, same time.